Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you also for the high level of participation. We're thankful because it was a late notification. However, so many things have been happening at DRD Gold that, notwithstanding the fact that we're in a closed period, we thought it was appropriate to provide this brief update on our capital projects. With me today is Henriette, our CFO, and Jaco, our Chief Operating Officer, and we'll be talking to you about where we are with regards to our Vision 28 capital projects. I'm going to move straight ahead to the next slide, which is our let's see if this is going to, oh, there we go. Sorry, it's now skipped forward. So just be mindful of the fact that there are forward-looking statements and estimates in this presentation. Be aware of those, and we'll get right into it. So firstly, to provide a bit of context for Vision 2028, in around about 2022, 2023, when it became apparent that we are going to go ahead with Ergo to extend its life of mine, and when we were looking also at what was required to implement Far West Gold Recoveries Phase 2, that there were a number of realities that we were facing and that we were going to have to deal with in order to implement that successfully. Firstly, at Ergo, it was clear that because we were entering a period of lower grades, lower head grades, that in order to maintain margin with lower revenues from those tons, we were going to have to fundamentally reset the cost profile of Ergo. So that was going to be the first requirement before we were going to be able to make any further plans for Ergo. We also had the situation of the Brakpan tailings facility. This facility was constructed in the 1980s. It was now reaching maturity. We had already had to cut back on the throughput deposition rate onto this facility from 2.1 million tons to 1.65 million tons per month. And we were going to have to create some additional space in order for Ergo to deposit its tails if we were going to fully optimize our ore body. And then at Far West Gold Recoveries, similar. The plant had to be made bigger. We needed more throughput capacity there. And its tailings storage facility was also approaching its final stages. It was going to need a whole new tailings storage facility. So Vision 2028 was over and above the cost profile, was going to be the plan in terms of which we were hoping to fix all of that. So the plan was then to increase both output capacity and as a consequence also, or rather throughput capacity, and as a consequence also output. By 2028, lifting our monthly throughput from 2.155 million tons per month to 3 million tons per month, and production to an estimated 200,000 ounces per year. And for the two operations, it meant the following. At Ergo, we needed to create additional tailings storage space or tailings storage capacity. The remaining resource is 430 million tons, and that was exactly the capacity that we needed to create going forward. And we also wanted to restore the monthly throughput to 1.8 million tons per month, up from the current 1.65 million tons per month. At Far West Gold Recoveries, it meant increasing the size of the Driefontein number 2 plant to lift its current capacity from 600,000 tons a month to 1.2 million tons. We'll talk about the actual throughput at the moment, but this is a capacity or a design feature. And then also to build a new regional tailings storage facility, which we call the RTSF, and then build a series or a network of pipelines that connected all of that and also connected it to an additional tailings reclamation site or a dump site. So first things first though, addressing Ergo's cost profile. So one of the key drivers, cost drivers at Ergo is electricity. It draws up to 35 megawatts of electricity at any given point in time. It is a very, very elaborate and a very complex footprint. And if we were going to impact or reset its cost profile, then this was a good place to start. So after many, many years looking at the different options, renewable energy options, we decided eventually on a 60 megawatt solar plant and a 185 megawatt battery energy storage system. Started building the system in 2022 and finished it in 2024 at a cost of 2.9 billion rand. And it is achieving the intended objective. Today, it carries approximately 47% of Ergo's energy requirements. It does so for roughly 12 hours a day, for a big part of the day. It is with direct power delivery. That's when the sun's shining. It goes directly into the solar plant and into the operations. And then for the rest, it draws power from the battery energy storage system, the BESS system. And that way, we by and large avoid peak tariffs. So on a blended peak tariff assessment or calculation, saving roughly R3.75 per kilowatt hour. It generated 135 gigawatt hours in 2026, so the plant's working well. And of course, there's the added benefits of not only reliability, but also a very significant reduction in the carbon footprint of Ergo of 122,000 tons of carbon emissions for the financial year 2026. So that's been set up, that's in place, and now Ergo could look forward to actually investing in capital infrastructure that was going to unlock an additional 22 odd years of life of mine, taking full advantage of the remainder of its resource base. And Vision 2028 was then built around 5 key projects, and we list each of those and also the estimated capital associated with those at the time. And we do that in sequence of when we anticipate to complete them. So firstly, at Ergo, as part of increasing its deposition capacity to taking it to that 430 million tons, the decision was taken to use Daggafontein no longer as a resource, but to use it as a tailing storage facility. If you go back a few years and you look at the reserve and resource statements of Ergo, you would have seen Daggafontein as part of the resources. We did say at the time we look at our entire asset portfolio dynamically and we'll apply it in the best possible way. And the best possible way of applying using Daggafontein in the context of Ergo's life of mine turned out to be to rather use it as a tailing storage facility. And you will recall that in its place we brought in the Crown Complex, which now forms a very large part of the future reserves of Ergo. So the Daggafontein tailing storage facility, we could actually recommence deposition onto Daggafontein, add 120 million tons, and do that at a capital cost of roughly R500 million. That would be the pipeline from the Ergo plant all the way through to Daggafontein and also the capital infrastructure on the dam itself. The second project was the Driefontein number 2 plant expansion to take its capacity up to 1.2 million tons per month. And that was at an estimated capital reinvestment of 1.9 billion rand. The third project is the network of pipelines at Far West Gold Recoveries. So from the plant to the new reclamation site, Libanon, and onto the RTSF, about 135 kilometers of pipelines, including return water lines. You'll recall that all of our water stays in a closed circuit. So all of that to the Libanon dump, 74 million tons of material coming into the life of mine, and that was going to cost 1.2 billion rand. And then the really big project, the RTSF, or the Regional Tailings Storage Facility. And I'll go into some of the details of what this project entails, but the estimated capex for the RTSF is 3.4 billion. And then the fifth one, the last to come online in terms of this plan, the Bidvest Tailings Storage Facility. For that, the initial estimated capex was 2.5 billion. And I'll elaborate a little bit more on that one as well going forward. But these are the 5 pillars of Vision 2028. And it's also the reason why we have this presentation today, because we've come some way since we started in 2024 in the construction and the commissioning of these. And we want to give you an update of where we are, how far we've managed to come, how closely we are tracking the goals that we've set for ourselves, and also provide you with some insight into what lies ahead in terms of CapEx and also estimated timelines. So moving to Far West Gold first. Far West Gold, 3 of the 5 projects are at Far West Gold, the Driefontein number 2 plant expansion, the pipeline project, and the RTSF. And what Vision 2028 envisages, the contribution of Far West Gold into this new profile of 3 million tons per month and 200,000 ounces per annum, is increasing its current throughput rate from 500,000 tons per month to 1.2 million tons per month. Now, I mentioned earlier, increasing the size of the plant from a 600,000 ton a month plant to a 1.2 million ton a month plant. Far West Gold has been running from the outset at a throttled throughput rate because of the size of its existing tailing storage facility, the Driefontein number 4 plant. And you'll see why we do this sort of thing, because it's also happening at Brakpan, and how that's assisting us now as we're getting to nearing the end of this particular facility's contribution and its capacity and availability. So the throughput rate that's being maintained at Far West Gold, and that has been maintained at Far West Gold from the outset, it's been 500,000 tons a month, but it's slightly lower than the actual capacity of the plant. And then this should then add 16 years to the current life of mine of Far West Gold Recoveries. That is excluding any new additions or materials that might be added. You would have seen in one of our earlier presentations that one of the Sibanye Stillwater dumps has been added. One of the Kloof dumps has been added into the resource base of Far West Gold Recovery. So that could be added later on. What we're talking about, the 16-year life of mine, is the collection of dumps that we acquired in 2018, and that form part of the current life of mine. RTSF then, of course, that is the big catalyst. That's the one that needs to come online in order to accommodate all of these tailings as we go forward for the remainder of the life of Far West Gold Recoveries. So I talk briefly to each of those projects sequentially. The DP2 plant expansion, as I mentioned, it's a duplication of the existing capacity, increasing throughput to 1.2 million tons per month and adding an elution circuit and a smelter. So that's always been one of the, let's call it the shortcomings of this particular project. It's been a very satisfying project to be involved with. It's done well right from the outset, but we've always had to take our loaded carbon to another facility, either the Driefontein 1 plant that belongs to Sibanye, or carted all the way across to Johannesburg to the Knights plant. Now, this project envisages its own elution facility, its own smelt house, and we've got some news in that regard coming up shortly. The pipeline project, as I stated earlier, this is 135 kilometers across the West Rand landscape, all the way from just outside of Carletonville through to close to Western Areas, and then back again to not far from Fourchville. So it's in a triangular fashion, and it covers a lot of mileage. It covers a lot of real estate. There you could see slurry line, return water line. So it's an integrated network that makes sure that we can transport our material at the requisite rate, but at the same time also optimize water use as part of our commitment to sustainability. So the 2 facilities that Far West Gold Recoveries would then be drawing material from would be the existing Driefontein number 3 dump, and then adding to it, there's the Libanon dump with another 600,000 tons per month. And Libanon, you would have seen in the earlier slide, is a 74 million ton facility. So that's for many years to come that these 2 facilities will deliver into the throughput profile of Far West Gold Recoveries. And then RTSF. This is a mammoth project, and we picked pictures, photographs that we're posting here to give you some sense of scale as to what this project's all about. It is depending on if you're looking at the inside or the outside, an 800 to an 850 hectare fully lined tailing storage facility. It's designed to receive an initial 1.2 million tons of tailings per month, The size of the infrastructure and the area of the dam is such, though, that one can increase that over time to a monthly deposition rate of 2.4 million tons. And it's designed to also ultimately store up to 800 million tons of mine tailings. So this could be an enabler for expansion, for further growth in that area, and also for a form of regional consolidation. So, Ergo Mining, Vision 2028, involved by and large tailing storage capacity. So the picture on the left-hand side, that is the old Daggafontein Dam that's now coming back online. And not only does it add 120 million tons of deposition capacity, but in the initial stages, we will be maintaining a deposition rate of 750,000 tons per month onto this tailings facility. And by taking up 750,000 tons per month of tailings, it means that the deposition rate at the Brakpan tailings facility, which is the one on the right, that is then reduced by 900,000 tons, or rather that is reduced down to 900,000 tons a month. So Ergo will maintain its throughput rate for the foreseeable future of 1.65 million tons per month, but the deposition profile has now structurally been amended. It's now been changed. It's much healthier now in the sense that the load on the Brakpan facility is significantly reduced by shifting it onto the Daggafontein tailings facility. And then the second component here, which is the last of the 5 projects, the Withok TSF. Now, I'll see if this, yeah, unfortunately the cursor doesn't seem to be pointing. Oh yeah, there we go. There we go. I just saw it. So if you look at, anyway, so on the right-hand picture, the one of the Brakpan tailings facility, the right top-hand corner, you'll see there's a little bit of an indent in the tailings dam. Now that is where, in that corner, is where the old Withok footprint was, and that's where the Withok tailings facility is going to be constructed. I'm telling you this now because there's a picture further down that shows this, and then at least this picture will assist you to just orientate yourself in terms of where the Withok tailings storage facility is going to be constructed. It was initially part of this entire storage facility. The Withok footprint is in fact a reclaimed footprint. There used to be a large tailings facility on that. Our predecessor had reclaimed that, and now, though it's still a licensed site, there are a whole lot of regulatory requirements that are necessary before we can actually recommission this dam. And I'll take some time, spend some time taking you through those requirements as well as we go through the presentation. So that is what we set out to achieve. And what follows now over the next few slides is an update of where we are. So we're 2 years into Vision 2028, started about 2 years ago, and now systematically things are starting to fall in place. Firstly, Daggafontein. Now this picture is a recent picture. It was taken a few days ago. The general manager of Ergo, who took this picture and who sent it to us, calls it the best sunset in Johannesburg. And I tend to agree with him because that shows you the Daggafontein tailings storage facility having been commissioned and now taking its first slurry from the Ergo plant. So we started pumping water on the 25th of June 2026. That's to put pressure into the lines and make sure that it's all running and that there aren't any leaks or anything like that. And then the first tailings were deposited on the 6th of July 2026. So this is one way we could say mission accomplished, and it was done within time and done within budget. And we're particularly pleased with this one because the pipeline route from Ergo onto the Daggafontein tailings facilities goes through a very challenging area. And we had a fair share of challenges in the construction of this pipeline. For example, we waited for as long as we could for permission from one of the local authorities to follow a particular route that would have taken about 6 kilometers out of the total route. And after it became apparent that this request is simply not being considered, we realized that we just have to go back to the old route, which involved very extensive community consultation, because it went right through certain communities, new emerging communities where people had their residences, where they had their businesses and so forth. It was achieved successfully. And as I say, on the 6th of July, 2026, mission was accomplished. And what we had set out to achieve on Daggafontein is happening. Secondly, DP2, Far West Gold Recoveries. Now, this too, from an engineering perspective, and even if you're not an engineer, you cannot be not be impressed by what's happening there. So this picture, if I can maybe first deal with that a little bit, what you see on the right-hand side of the picture, that corrugated structure, concrete corrugated structure, that is in fact the smelt house, and it's the smelt house that was designed right from scratch, off a blank sheet, and it had a number of things, design parameters that were taken into consideration in the design of that smelt house. Security was the primary one. Efficiency was as equally important, and also scalability. Now that smelt house was commissioned, or rather, let me first talk about what we're doing here before I talk about the commissioning. So next to the smelt house, that's where you see the helipad, which is also fully walled, which means that security and logistics and just the flow of material played a very big part in the design and the construction of this whole facility. So those two, the elution circuit rather, and the smelt house, those two were commissioned on the 14th of July, 2026. That was yesterday. I had the first smelt there yesterday, and I'll show you some of the material that we gathered during that occasion. The remainder of this plant is weeks away from finalization, and it will be done, all things being equal, by the end of the first quarter of 2027. So that means that by September, this plant will be done. It will have been finished on time, and importantly, and this is something that was mentioned yesterday when we did the commissioning of the smelt house, is it was done without having to go back to the board to ask for more money. So the initial capital estimate was met, and we came in on time and within budget. Once fully ramped up, this facility, as I said earlier, takes the plant to 1.2 million tons per month and contributes to that 16 years of life of mine at that particular rate. The plan going forward over the next few weeks and in the months to follow, before the rest of the Far West Gold infrastructure is commissioned, would be to actually start processing material and treating material at the new circuit, at the new CIL circuit, and all the way through. And while we do that, to then do a full service of the existing circuit that's been in operation since 2018. So the old circuit's getting a full service. The new circuit's coming on commission, and will go to a stable state by the time that we bring in the rest of the Far West Gold throughput. And there's a picture of yesterday's event. So that is it was a good event for us. Far West Gold, as I say, has always had to send its carbon away. So you do all this work, but then you don't get to see your gold bar. Now, yesterday, the Far West Gold personnel, and that's the plant manager, holding up the bar, there they for the first time saw their end product. It was whisked away by helicopter roughly 4 minutes after this picture was taken. That's the nature of the logistics involving the transportation of doré bars. And it was a good smelt. It was a bar that weighed just over 17 kilograms. So right off the bat, the smelt house, this elution circuit and smelt house is performing to specification. So that's 2 out of 5. Then moving on to the next pipeline project, Far West Gold Recoveries. As I say, this one is connecting the Libanon dump to the plant, and then the plant to the RTSF. We're about 95% complete there. Civils have been done in terms of the pipeline, the connections have been done, and so forth. The one aspect here, which is an important catalyst to actually go to the 1.2 million tons, is the construction of the reclamation station at the Libanon dump. And as is customary or was customary in the days when these mines were built, the dump that's going to be reclaimed is in a lower lying area. And in this particular area, this whole part of the West Rand, you do have a whole host of wetlands scattered across the landscape. And as it turns out, the reclamation station, the pump station, is sitting in the buffer zone abutting a wetland. So it's not in the wetland, but it's in a buffer zone that needs to be maintained between a wetland and any kind of infrastructure. And anything that you do in this buffer zone that involves water requires a water usage license. And we can only start construction of the reclamation station when the water usage license has been issued. So this process was started in 2024 already. It's gone through the regional offices of the Department of Water Affairs in Bloemfontein. We've met all of their requirements, all of their conditions, and it's now sitting in the national office in Pretoria, waiting for them to verify that they're happy with the recommendation from the regional office, and then we should be getting our water usage license. And then it's going to be 9 months from the day that we actually get the water usage license until the pump station is complete. And that'll be the day when we also start pumping. Now, we have had issues in the past with water usage licenses. The turnaround time with these licenses, and one would imagine it's because of the complexity and the sheer volume of work that this department has to deal with, or this office of this department has to deal with. It does take time. The turnaround time is slow. We built in quite a bit of fat in here, but what we've also decided to do, because this license is due now, we want to start construction now, was to start offsite, start assembling parts of the reclamation stations. It will be sort of slotted in as and when this goes through. But be careful not to start with any civil work, with foundations, etc., until after the license actually been issued. It is on the critical path, though. We can only go from 500,000 tons a month to 600,000 tons a month when we get commissioning of the RTSF. But we can only go back to 1.2 million tons as and when this pump station is completed, and we can start construction of the pump station once the water usage license is issued. So the throughput remains 500,000 tons per month until the RTSF is given the go-ahead. So dealing with the RTSF, and once again, this photograph, this picture was designed to illustrate the scale of this construction. So 800 hectares is the size of a sort of an average farm in this area. You could make a very, very decent living on that piece of land as a crop and cattle farmer. That's the size of the area that we're covering with a very large piece of plastic. And it's coming together quite nicely. We started on the 30th of June, 2026. We're now at 67% of completion. What I can say is that the only interruptions and interferences that we've had in construction on this site have been weather related. In terms of logistics, in terms of our contractors showing up on time, in terms of materials that had to be supplied and delivered, we've taken up the entire capacity of the supplier of this liner for more than a year. In terms of all of those things, in terms of diesel, even now during this recent issue with the concerns about interruption in diesel supply and so forth, communities, etc., the only interruption that we've had in terms of executing on this project have been weather-related, rainstorms. It never rained there until it started, and it started 2 years ago when we started construction. But we're on track in terms of construction to meet our targeted commissioning date and to have this dam ready to start taking 1.2 million tons per month by the first quarter of financial 2028. However, it's not all in our control. There are 2 other contingencies that we need to meet in order to start with commissioning. The first is beneficial occupation. It's a technical term, and it basically means we're given the go-ahead by the Department of Water Affairs. It's the engineering department, so both Dam Safety Office and engineering department are involved with the construction. That's the design, construction, the safety, etc., and then also the design. So they need to give us the go-ahead to take beneficial occupation, and they'll give us that go-ahead if we achieve particular percentage of completion, and provided we've met the design parameters. It's a 60-day process. They're being kept fully involved, and they'll be invited onto site as and when we are ready to ask for beneficial occupation. Assuming that they do give us beneficial occupation, and that will be after we've completed phase 1 out of 3 phases, and Jaco will give more detail on that later on in the presentation. If they then do give us that permission, another very important requirement or catalyst is the weather. So I'll move on to the next slide, which is also another picture. This one is the starter wall of the dam. It's been fully lined, ready to start taking slimes. An important factor is the weather. So this is a fully lined dam, and the drains in the basin of this dam need to be commissioned in a very particular way to make sure that they do not get choked. And that needs to happen in relatively dry conditions. We cannot have large rainstorms because you'll have a washing of fines into those drains. So the weather is an important part. And some of the pressure, actually a lot of the pressure has come off the commissioning of this dam, because we were working against a very specific timeline in terms of availability of deposition space. So a few years back, in fact, up until not much more than a year ago, the thinking was that we were going to have to come off the Driefontein number 4 dam a lot earlier than what's turned out to be the case. So we do have headroom in terms of maintaining a throughput rate of at least 500,000 tons for the foreseeable future, and that allows us quite a bit of flexibility in terms of the commissioning of this dam. So we won't get to 1.2 million tons until after we've started commissioning, but at the very least we can maintain the current throughput rate comfortably for about another year, maybe even longer. I think it's until December of next year, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so until December of next year, we'll be able to maintain the current throughput rate of 500,000 tons, which will allow us to do this commissioning properly and not take steps that require that we then take. So 1 step forward, 5 steps back. But Jaco will take you through all of those details. But construction is on track. We're hoping to be able to constructively engage with the regulator anytime soon now to get beneficial occupation, and then we'll keep our eyes on the weather. We're in fact happy to have this conversation now, considering what's been happening in South Africa in the last few years. If we had the rains that we saw in the Western Cape, in the Robinson area, and further down to George and further down the coast, and even in the Kalahari up in Kuruman, further up north, we probably would have been having a different conversation today, because in all likelihood, that amount of rain would have caused some structural damage to the work that we had done up until now. But we're very blessed that although a lot of rain fell onto this facility, that did cause a measure of interruption and standing time, we did not have any structural damage, and we can still realistically target the initial target that we'd set for ourselves of starting to receive 1.2 million tons per month by the start of the next financial year. These are the contingencies, though, with regards to commissioning. So the Withok project, so this is the one where there is going to be a later implementation date than what Vision 2028 suggests, for a variety of reasons. But first, in terms of the technical specifications of this dam. So it abuts the Brakpan TSF. I referred you to that little indent in the side of the dam right at the start of this presentation. It is a licensed footprint. It used to abut Brakpan, and it's intended to abut the Brakpan dam once again, ultimately taking 310 million tons and then taking more off the Brakpan tailings facility as and when it is commissioned. We believe now, after having looked at exactly what's required to build this dam, it too will be a fully lined dam. It's a different site, whereas the RTSF was an old cropland or a maize farm. This is a site where there used to be a tailings facility. There's been quite a lot of harvesting of materials for cladding and so forth off this footprint. So there's going to be a lot of earthwork taking place, firstly just to prepare the surface for lining. And then as it turned out, we saw a number of geological features, or notwithstanding the fact that this used to be a tailings dam, the standards that are being maintained nowadays, or that are being required nowadays with regards to the installation of a tailings dam, are such that different measures have to be taken, and additional work needs to be taken as well. So maybe just to summarize here, for Withok, we've completed the public participation part of the process. That was done quite some time ago. The design engineer, or the approved professional person, and his team, they've all been approved. This is for the design and ultimately also the construction. It's the same team that's doing RTSF, so they managed to split their time to also do this design. Applications for an environmental authorization and waste management licenses, those have been submitted. Those are licenses that are considered by the departments, by the DMPR, Mineral Petroleum Resources. Then again, because we're going to be dealing with lots of water, and because of the location and the geological characteristics of the site, a water usage license is required. That application was also submitted quite some time ago. However, when we did the drilling of the site, we determined what exactly is going to be required for construction. It turned out that there are certain unique geological features that need special attention. Some grouting is going to have to be done, and so forth and so forth. So those technical specifications have been submitted to the Department of Water and Sanitation. They are now considering whether those are adequate and whether they will allow us to prepare the site in accordance with the proposals that we've submitted. And then once the water usage license has been submitted, and provided that the conditions that are imposed are consistent with our proposals, we are just about ready to submit the design for the dam itself to the Dam Safety Office. That is a different department of the DWS. We had hoped to have the approvals in place by now, by June of 2026, but the geological features that we came across, the fact that the construction of this dam has now also been brought into the context of the Brakpan closure plan and the dam safety evaluation associated with Brakpan, and the additional site preparation work that we've come to realize that's necessary to be done on this particular site. We don't think that we'll see those approvals by 2026. We've also revisited the timeline for the construction of this dam. Initially, we thought that 18 months should be sufficient. We think it's probably going to be closer to 24 months. And that being the case, it means that we hope to complete this dam during or by the end of 2029 latest. In the meantime, what that basically involves, and Jaco will take you through that, we're going to go back to RTSF and its commissioning. In the meantime, what that basically involves is, it means that Ergo is going to be at 1.65 million tons per month going forward until such time as this dam is completed. I do have a wrap-up at the end where I go through some of the details and provide some insight into exactly where all of these projects are taking us and what needs to happen next in order to get to the full 3 million tons. But I think before we do that, and because commissioning of the RTSF is such a crucial component of this project, I'm going to hand over to Jaco now to just give you some better insights into what commissioning of the RTSF actually involves. So Jaco, over to you.
Thanks, Neil. I'm going to try and just explain to you a few structures and a few practical implementations by taking you through a whole bunch of slides. And essentially, it revolves around the construction of the RTSF. And what you'll see on the screen right now, the green area is what we require for beneficial occupation of RTSF. Beneficial occupation meaning the RTSF is actually divided into 3 phases. And this is phase 1, where we get authorization to start depositing on this area while still constructing the rest of the dam in phase 2 and phase 3. So all of this area needs to be lined. And as you can see from the black liner, certain parts of the plant has already been or area has already been lined. I'm just trying to get this cursor of mine working properly. And what you'll see is that there's a fairly large area that's already covered and a certain area that has already been prepared but is still required for lining purposes. A portion that's more important for us, however, is associated with the drains. Now, what you'll see is whilst we're in constructing and we don't have beneficial occupation yet, the water that falls on this area, the dam slopes, the topography slopes from north to south. So the southern area being at the bottom of your screen, north obviously at the top of the screen. And for that reason, all of the water then it needs to be drained off this area, and that's where you see this temporary stormwater drain canal being installed. At this point in time, all of that water drains through that stormwater canal. Once we do get beneficial occupation, that stormwater canal needs to be sealed off, which will then contain all of this water within the basin itself. We'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later on. All right. So then what you can see, so there you can see the stormwater canal. So the radial drains, those are the first set of drains. And we'll talk about the construction of the drains and what they look like a little bit later on. I'm just going to run you through the drainage systems and what the purpose of each one of these drains are. So the first set of drains are your radial drains. They go into the basin of the RTSF. Second set of drains is the borrow pit drain. That's running around, it's indicated by this green line, running right around the tailings dam on the inside of the starter wall. You then have your main drain, as indicated by this yellowish color. And as the name suggests, that's the main drain that recovers majority of your water from the inside of the basin and the floor of your tailings dam. That's followed by an intermediate drain and a toe drain. Now these drains, what will happen is once you start depositing, you'll start depositing onto the inside of the drain. That's called upstreaming. But then at a point in time, you'll also do downstream depositioning, which increases the width of the starter wall. And you'll actually start depositing on the outside. And that is the purpose of your intermediate drain, is to then cover the water from whatever you're depositing on the downstream side of things. And then you've got a toe drain. Right at the toe of the tailings dam facility, you've got another set of drains. All of these drains are then, the water from them are then collected in a collector pipe right at the toe of the final facility wall. And this water from the toe drain collecting the radial drains, the borrow pit drain, the main drain, toe drain, as well as the intermediate drain, goes into the collector pipe, and from there it flows into dam 3 and 4 on the southern side of the facility. So all of the drains, the purpose of the drains is to collect water from the base of the facility. And the base of the facility being lined, so therefore the only way for this water to get out of the facility is via this drainage system. So the drains is extremely important design factor in this facility. As you can see there, dam 3 and 4 at the bottom, and dam 1 and 2 at the top, but we'll talk about dam 1 and 2 just now. So what you'll see on this slide here, obviously you can see all of the drains, but then inside the facility there's a berm wall that's created, and this wall is used, the decant pumping system will be situated on this wall, and you'll retract that decant pumping system as you start filling tailings dam. And this water is now on top of the tailings dam. So this is the water that's captured higher up in the facility. This water is drained and pumped via a pump station and a pipeline to your return water dam 1 and 2 at the top of the facility. All of the drains, as mentioned to you, drain the water from the bottom of the facility to dam 3 and 4, and then the water from dams 3 and 4 is also pumped across via external pipeline to return water dam 1 and 2. So all of the water from this facility eventually ends up in dam 1 and 2, and then it's pumped back from dam 1 and 2 to the reclamation stations, where we utilize all of the water in a closed water circuit. Now, Neil mentioned that rain is probably the biggest impact that we've got on the construction of the facility. And if you look at this area highlighted in red, that is the area which is a high-risk zone for us during construction phase if we had to receive a significant amount of rain during that period. Now, the reason for that, as I've mentioned to you, this is that temporary stormwater drainage pipe that we've got in currently. So all the water that falls on this facility, we can currently drain because this is clean water. It has not been impacted by any mining activity, and we can drain that water off the site. Once we start with beneficial occupation and depositioning, we've got to close up this temporary stormwater pipe. We actually seal it up with concrete, and all of the water is then contained that falls on the surface area. The problem that you sit with is as we deposit material into this the bottom side of the basin, we require good drainage, and if there's stormwater entering this, it reduces the density of the material. As soon as you reduce the density of the material, you run the risk of getting segregation of your finer particles, and that is a huge risk for the drainage system. Now, just to explain what I've just said in terms of segregation and how that works, I'll just quickly explain to you how the starter wall and the drainage system is constructed to show what this segregation of material might have the impact on. So what you see here is, first off, the starter wall, the outside, the borrow pit section. This is what we're referring to here. That area is being compacted and rolled and prepared for your liner and your drainage system to be installed. So this is the base layer that's being of your earthworks that's being constructed to ensure you've got a competent base layer prior to putting your drainage system down. That is what that system looks like once you've compacted it, or the earthworks looks like, and you'll have the borrow pit drain up here and the main drain on the left-hand side. Once you've prepared that surface area, it's then ready to put your liner down, and we put the entire area is then covered by a HDPE liner. The purpose of this is obviously to protect your groundwater, and any water that comes off the facility is then captured by this liner. But the liner is HDPE, you need to protect that, and that we protect by placing a geomembrane on top of the liner, as you can see there. The next layer will be a stone base layer that we put down, and then on top of the stone layer, you place this perforated pipe, which is the main removing system of the water. So this pipe is perforated, and it's on a bed of stone. And next section is you'll cover that pipeline with additional stone material, as you can see there, until it's leveled out. Once it's leveled out, you then fold the geofabric over. the constructed material, and here's actually a very good picture to show you the 4 phases. So if you look at where my cursor is right now, that is where the pipeline is installed, and you're still busy filling that area with the stone prior to folding over the geomembrane. On top here, if you look at the main drain, so that's the borrow pit drain, that's the main drain. What you can see here is the geomembrane has now been is just before it's being folded over. The area has now been filled with the stone. You then fold over the membrane and you put a sand layer on top of that. That's what you see on the next slide where my cursor is right now. Then once you've put the sand layer on top of the geomembrane, we put a sacrificial liner on top of that sand layer. The purpose of the sacrificial liner is to ensure that any dust that's blown over this area does not contaminate the sand layer, because again, that is very fine material which runs the risk of blinding it. So as soon as we start depositing, we'll actually remove the sacrificial green layer you can see there. So essentially what you then end up with is the sand layer, and then all of that material. Here you can see the various layers now being constructed and the pipe coming out. All of these pipes are then connected via a manhole. So what you can see here, for instance, is a radial drain, main drain, and an intermediate drain coming in, and this is the collector pipe running through. So all of this water being collected into a manhole and then connecting up with your collector pipeline running around the tailings dam. So that's essentially now, if I take a side view of that constructed layer, you can now see the purpose. These are now the various layers. So you've got the sand layer, the geomembrane layer, the stone material, and then the perforated pipe. So the water on top, on the inside, is now allowed, like a French drain, to flow through this various material and enter into the pipeline, and then this water is removed from the base of the facility. As you can see there, the water then enters into the perforated pipe and is removed. The problem, however, as mentioned to you, is if we drop the density and we get segregation, then the fine particles in the material flows faster than what you've got the heavier material, and that then starts flowing into this material that you've got on top of the perforated pipe. It enters in there and then starts clogging up the sand, as well as the spaces in between the stone material. And then if you allow that long enough, you run the risk of clogging up this entire circuit and then preventing any water from entering into your drainage system. And as I've mentioned to you, this is very important to us. This is the only way we've got to remove the water from the base of the facility. So very important for us is to prevent this scenario from happening. And this brings me to this slide. So as Neil has mentioned, we've got an opportunity to increase the treatment capacity at DP2 from 500,000 tons per month to 600,000 tons per month, up to a point in time when we then anticipate to bring the Libanon tailings dam online. As soon as we bring Libanon tailings dam online, we can then increase the treatment capacity from 600,000 tons up to 1.2 million tons per month. So during this period here, there's an opportunity to increase it from 500 to 600 for a 6-month period, which equates to approximately 120 kilograms of gold. But this is dependent on a few things. Obviously, getting regulatory approval, getting the Libanon facility up and running, making sure that the construction is happening on time, but also depending on weather. So, as just explained, the impact that additional rain can have and the risk that poses for this facility. And therefore, the current planning for us is to continuously look at this opportunity and see how the construction of this facility is looking like, but eventually starting in this period here, after Q4 of 2027, we intend to then ramp up to 1.2 million tons per month. This is to ensure that we do not compromise the RTSF facility, and making sure that it's constructed in a responsible manner. I'm going to hand over to Henriette to just run through the capital side of things.
There you go. Thanks, Jaco.
Good morning, everybody. It's my absolute pleasure to take you through the capital slides on what we've spent up to date, and then what we're planning to spend still until FY 2029. Just maybe a reminder of what Neil mentioned before. We embarked on this journey a few years ago to spend this 10 billion rand over the next few years. Just to put that into perspective, when we actually decided to name Vision 2028, roundabout in 2024, our market cap was about 13 billion rand, with a gold price of 1.2 million rand per kilogram. Today, we're sitting at a market cap of about 30 billion rand, with a gold price of 2.1 million rand per kilogram. So our timing could not have been better. So if you look at this capital profile, spend up to date, so if you look up to FY 2026, we're about halfway through our capital spend, with just over 5 billion spent on our Vision 2028 projects. Most of that, as you can see, was spent on DP2, on the RTSF, and on Daggafontein this current financial year. And you can see, if we go into that next financial, into our forecast for FY 2027, very little of DP2 remaining, and Daggafontein as well. As Neil mentioned, excellent results. It was an excellent day yesterday. I think the whole team was so proud to actually smelt that first gold bar, project that was delivered in time and then on budget. Daggafontein, just as an exciting story for us on that side. So yeah, tracking well. Next year, we're planning to spend about 2.6 billion rand. And if you look at that, most of that relates to RTSF, a little bit on the pipelines. And then we're hoping to start our capital spend on the Withok section. A new feature, if you look at that light blue coming through there, is the DP2 UFR plant that we've approved capital of about 880 million rand, which Neil will elaborate on later on. Just maybe also just to stand still on the Withok side. So as Neil mentioned, we started off with a capital estimate of about 2.5 billion. We did re-look at that based on everything that happened in the world over the past few months. So oil prices that have increased, the inflation that is expected to increase as well. So we believed it was prudent to re-evaluate, also based on the new information that we got on it from a design point of view. And we revalued that to about 3 billion rand. That will still be refined as time goes by, as we get closer to the time. That timeline is also fairly fluid, but we do have space available on Brakpan with Daggafontein until 2031. So yeah, maybe I just want to also end up by saying thank you to the teams, thank you to the contractors that has made DP2, Daggafontein, RTSF, and all of the projects that we will still embark a success. I believe it was a good story so far to tell. Over to you, Neil.
Thanks, Henriette. Yeah, it's exciting stuff. Until we built the solar farm, I think our largest capital project was 360 million rand. Solar farm, having managed to commission the solar farm successfully and build it for just under 2.9 billion, I think demonstrated the ability of the team to run these big projects the delivery of Daggafontein, and now also the 1.9 billion rand DP2, I think further endorses that ability. We're really hoping that we can deliver RTSF on time. As I said, the two main contingencies there is one, further approval and weather. Then Withok is going to be an interesting test, but we'll talk through that as we go forward. So if you were to then add the sum of the parts, you saw the Vision 2028 ideal, the ambition, as set out right at the start of this presentation to provide context. And with the 4 of the 5 projects that are due for commissioning over the next financial year, those 4 projects take us to 2.85 million tons per month. So within 150,000 tons per month of the targeted estimated output, and a production profile of between 185,000 and 195,000 ounces per annum. We typically provide that range. This is not guidance, but it's sort of a range that is consistent with the guidance that we've been given in the past few years, because it does depend on the volume throughput, and it also depends on extraction efficiency. And this is the sort of business where an additional 0.01 gram a ton of recovery adds 20 kilos of gold in a particular month. So it is extremely sensitive to extraction efficiencies, and hence the slightly broader range in terms of where we believe we could land. So that's the impact and the contribution of 4 of the 5 projects in terms of volume throughput. Once Withok is commissioned, a further 150,000 tons per month is then added to this throughput capacity. That then takes us to the target of 3 million tons per month. That's not going to happen in 2028, as I explained earlier, with the additional design parameters, with the integration of Withok into the recommendations following the dam safety evaluation of Brakpan, as with the additional work that needs to be done in terms of regulatory approval before we actually get the go-ahead to start construction. We think that this is not going to happen before 2029, or the earliest that we will have access to this will be the latter parts of 2029, perhaps even early into 2030. Until then, Ergo stays on 1.65 million tons per month, and it can maintain that rate with the current deposition construct until 2031. So the next, let's call it critical date for delivery, in terms of not to have to go down in throughput capacity in order to at least maintain current throughput capacity, is 2031. And that is where Withok becomes a very important cog in the wheel. So in summary, what's happened until now is Daggafontein is operating, DP2 is moving through commissioning, it's weeks away from final commissioning. The pipeline is 95% built, and as soon as we get that water usage license, construction will start on Libanon. 9 months later, Libanon will start contributing 600,000 tons a month to the total profile. As soon as we get beneficial occupation at RTSF, 500,000 tons becomes 600,000 tons a month, adding then Libanon as and when that comes through, and then Withok as and when it comes through, it will initially add that additional 150,000 tons of throughput per month, and that's the part that then adds to the life of mine of Ergo. That's the bulk of the 430 million tons of additional material, contributing 310 million tons of additional material. So I do want to reflect briefly also on beyond 2028. So life does not end in 2028. There's stuff that happens beyond that point. In the near term, we've been talking occasionally about cracking the code. So if you are processing between 2 and 3 million tons of material per month, then it's those small incremental changes in extraction efficiency that make the big difference in total output. And we happened upon this technology, the Aztec Upflow Reactor, a while back. We did some test work. We liked what we saw, and we took a recommendation to the board, and we've been given the go-ahead to build an Aztec Upflow Reactor at Far West Gold Recoveries at a cost of 880 million rand. The target date for completion of this reactor is in the 4th quarter of this financial year, 2027 financial year. Now, I think we want to be very clear on how we're approaching this in terms of the expectations that we're creating in the market. This will be the first time that we do something like this. Everything else that you saw in this presentation, CIL, smelt houses, solution plants, etc., tailings facilities, a lot of that is what we've been doing now for many, many years. This is completely new. This is frontier stuff for us. So whilst we are very happy with the pilot work that we did, the test work that we did, and they were not laboratory scale, there was a proper pilot plant. So whilst we're very happy with that, this has not been tested in real world conditions. And what we've seen in the past is that your test work do not necessarily always match your real world conditions. Typically, your test work is a little bit more positive than your real world conditions. So we are going to be cautioning the market to please just keep that in mind. We will know what the contribution of the upflow reactor will be once we see it. As I say, positive test work, but we'll know when we know. And it's important information, and therefore we're just going to be telling you about where we are with regards to the Aztec, but we're not updating any of our forecasts or any of our guidances and so forth in terms of what we believe this reactor will deliver until we've seen real world numbers. It's an important development though, and we hope that it lives up to expectations. And in the medium and longer term, so RTSF can take far more than what we are going to be using it for initially. We're going to be putting 1.2 million tons per month onto this facility initially, but it's been designed, it has both the size and the area to accommodate 2.4 million tons per month. And we could incrementally increase it in chunks of 600,000 tons per month over time, over the next 7 years. So as you systematically start filling the basin, filling the floor rather, you could start increasing that throughput rate. So over the next 7 years, there will be the capacity to take additional materials. For us, what we need to do now is to find the additional opportunities to actually take it up to those additional tons. That's tomorrow's story, but we're thinking about it already, and hopefully at some point in future we'll be able to have some news on that as well. So that's been the presentation. That is the update. We're going to check now to see if there are questions, and then we will deal with those best we can. How much time did we use? Okay, so we've got plenty of time for questions. Okay.
So there's a handful of questions and comments. Arnold from Grant and Nedbank asked or says, well done on these projects. You're clearly setting up the company for the long term. He's asked, do you have follow-up projects, or will you return more cash to shareholders?
Look, we will always look for new opportunities, and that was the essence of the last slide, because we do want to, I mean, our whole, it's not just a strategy, it's become a value, is to optimize our asset portfolio. So Arnold, yes, we would want to look at additional opportunities and see if we can take full advantage of the RTSF. But until such time as those investments are made, the cash will go to shareholders. We're not going to be hoarding cash.
And then Bruce Williamson asks, hi Neil, do you know how many similar water license applications the department is handling?
I don't, but it's a lot. You know, they're distinct offices with the Department of Water Affairs. There's the Dam Safety Office. These are physicists and engineers and so forth. They look at integrity of dams, the design of dams, etc., etc. So obviously, you know, they operate separately, and we engage with them on the design of RTSF, on the commissioning of RTSF, the design of BITHOC, and so forth and so forth. That's completely apart. The other office, which is the office dealing with water usage license, I think the volume of work there and the complexity is vast. All of the water usage licenses that we've applied for in the past have run over time, and I've never had the sense that it's being done deliberately. I just think that it's the size, the scale, the volume of work, and sometimes also the complexity that gets in the way. But you know, you just keep at it, and You make sure that your communications lines remain open. You try and anticipate what the requirements might be. And once you get new requirements, you deliver into those as quickly as possible. And then you hope that you don't get put back 90 days, that they actually consider those sort of within that same 90-day frame. But it's people having to deal with this, and they've only got so much time and so much resources, so one needs to be mindful of that. But that's a lot. I do believe that there are thousands of water usage licenses.
And then Andy Close asks, based on the info provided on the tailings dams construction, is the technology and engineering proven and used in the past, or an entirely new design?
Jaco, you'd be best. I think it's the first one in South Africa that's been built like this, but I don't think it's entirely new.
So no, it's the design is standard in terms of drainage canals and how do you install the drainage pipes and so forth. It is the first facility of its size on a liner, though. So yes, the size of it is new. There are many other tailings dams in South Africa that has been built on a liner, but none of them at this size. No.
And then Glenn Trolls asks, unit costs under Vision 2028 mineral reserve declined over the same half year, and the newest resource addition grades 0.22 against the 0.29 reserve average. As throughput scales to 3 million tons per month by FY 2028, what cash operating costs and AISC range does the company anticipate on the lower grade material? And at what rand gold price does the program stop being self-funding?
Yeah, look, we'll give those numbers at the results presentation in August. So obviously, what we wanted to do here is, having recently commissioned two parts of the 5-part project, we thought it's a good time to update the market. These are important numbers. We don't want to use estimates or guesstimates, so we'll work those numbers over the next few weeks before we do our results presentation in August, and then hopefully we'll be able to give some insight into that. And the same applies to the Aztec. I see there's a question also about the IRR on the Aztec. And that's an equally important number. We're not going to venture estimates or create expectations. We know what the pilot plant did. We're not using the pilot plant as a threshold in terms of what we expect to return. On a discounted basis, it still covers cost of capex. And that's as far as I think we would want to go at this stage. We'll know when we know, and we'll make sure that we update the market as soon as we can.
And then Bulelwa and Dara asks, with the renewable energy solar plant up and running, have you successfully met your target of reducing your scope 2 emissions by 50%?
Yes. Yeah, that's 22,000 tons of carbon that we saved. So yes, we have.
Okay, Nick Dinham asked regarding the Aztec, but you've responded to that.
Yeah.
Glenn Charles also asked, the Capital Markets Day presentation shows Kloof 2 dump added a mineral resources in the half year. Resources in the half year to December 2025 by transfer from Sibanye-Stillwater. On what commercial terms was it transferred? Purchase price, royalty, profit share, or other considerations, and how are related party transfers of this kind reviewed and approved?
Yeah.
Will the same framework govern future dump acquisitions?
Yeah, so there is a specific framework within which it takes place. That's in terms of the 2017 contract or the 2018 contract. And what it basically involves is that when Sibanye no longer has a need for a dump, as was the case here, it can offer the dump to DRD Gold. DRD Gold can then take possession of the dump with a view of retreating it on condition that it assumes responsibility for the rehabilitation. So there's no exchange of money. It's sort of let's say it's a continuation of the EA that supports the project in its entirety. So as and when they become available, that doesn't apply to their entire portfolio. It applies to the dumps that are associated with Kloof and Driefontein. Obviously, the portfolio extends beyond that. So if we want anything else from Sibanye in that area, then we're going to have to pay for it.
Thank you. And then Nick Dillon asks, what will you do if the license at Withok is not granted by December 2026?
There are a number of options that one could consider. We may decide to then sort of reverse the flow of material from Crown to the RTSF. So Ergo could then go to a significantly reduced throughput profile, and the split will then just be towards the west and not towards the east. So there are a number of issues, and of course when the capital number is not insignificant. So at this stage, we're working hard to make sure that we put ourselves in a position to start construction of this facility. But yeah, before we do, we're going to run the numbers again. So it's still very much part of Vision 2028, but we'll take a firm decision on the go ahead as and when that time comes.
Thank you. And that is all the questions.
Are those the questions?
It was around the IRR.
That was the IRR.
Neil has addressed already.
Yeah.
So all the questions have been addressed.
Yeah. And maybe just as a final comment, when we started building this, all of these pieces of infrastructure, there was no Minerals Amendment Act. It proposes to introduce a number of changes. Everything that we're busy with now will finish. But of course, as and when we need to start spending the first money on Withok, we'll once again run the model and we'll consider the impact, the environment at the time, gold price, capex, whether it's going to be on time, and also what the implications of the act might be. And we'll run that model at $3,500 an ounce. And if it works, we'll build it. If it doesn't, then we'll look at other alternatives. Is that right? Good. Thank you so much, everyone, for dialing in. We really appreciate the fact that you all signed in for this. It was a very good uptake, and notwithstanding the fact that it was short notice, so very pleased about that. And we'll give you further information and further updates come August when we report on the 2026 numbers. Thank you very much.
Thank you.